The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.
Welcome back to another edition of Spy for Rent. I'm Tony Kurre. Very special guest sitting in today, Brittany from Spy for Rent. Spy for Rent. The Spy, the number 4 rent.com, 790-3051, 790-3051. Kurre, of course, is usually doing the show with us every single week here on Tony Kurre Radio, which, by the way, you can hear the show every Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Central Time. It airs all over the world. And, of course, wherever you get your favorite podcast, info at TonyKurreRadio.net. Also, our email address. If you want to send us some emails, we'll take some questions as well. Brittany, first of all, how are you doing? Great to have you on the show today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
It's awesome to have you on the show. And I know that Kurre's actually doing, what is Kurre doing today? Just to kind of share with people what spies do when they're not doing podcasts.
Yeah. So he's actually working on some digital forensics right now. So he had a meeting with an attorney and a client going over some cell phone forensics and all of that. So
that is certainly something we've talked about that on the show a lot. Little did we know 20 or 30 years ago that the cell phone is probably the most poignant, the most important piece really of any investigation. Just talk a little bit about what you can get from a cell phone, how often it's relevant in a particular case. And I mean, it basically has everything we are about on it. It's amazing that you can get so much from the little piece of technology.
Yeah. So, I mean, we do, phones or computers or any of that. And people think just because they delete a text message or they delete, whatever they may be browsing for, all of that, it's very simple if we have the phone for us to go in and pretty much pull any data that you ever done anything with the phone with. So, GPS records, cell phone, text messages, really any kind of data that is on that phone. Once you put it on that phone, it's like anything else that's digital. It's accessible. So it's very hard for you to completely delete a lot of things. So if we've got an actual phone or, obviously you think about cheating spouses or somebody cheating in text messages or Facebook messages or, any of that kind of stuff. Because even Facebook messages, I'm not the expert in this area, but I do know a little bit. And I know we've done some, things that have surprised me because it'll be, the WhatsApp or the Snapchat or, whatever there's a whole lot that you think it's all completely gone. And then you pull all this data and it shows all the messages that you've been messaging back and forth that you thought were just completely deleted that nobody was ever going to see. And so, we see that a lot. Obviously, like I said, cheating spouses, but I mean, even in the workplace, if, harassment or, if somebody is trying to get into your data, things like that, we can access all of that and kind of see. So it's really cool. I'm not, like I said, the technical person is not me. So I'm not the expert in it, but I can baseline, a little bit of what we do and all the cool stuff that we get off of it. But we've actually done a lot of court cases and been able to provide a lot of evidence for different cases to be able to help supporting using phones or laptops. What
about burner phones? I mean, is there any way to hide anything? I mean, because once you put something out there, it's out there. You just have to find it. You may not have the phone itself, but if you have a burner phone, is there any way around that?
So burner phones get a little more tricky. If we have the physical phone, we can pretty much pull anything off of it. But when we don't have the physical phone, it's a little bit harder to do that. So if somebody has thrown their phone in the middle of the ocean and we're never going to find it again, a burner phone or not, we may not be able to pull all the data. There are certain resources we can use to pull stuff off of it, even if we don't have the physical phone. There are ways to go around and try to find it. But burner phones are definitely a little more tricky when it comes to that. And, if we don't have the physical phone, it's a little bit harder.
I've watched Dateline enough. Her name's Brittany, by the way. She joined us. We're not going to use her last name just for sake of keeping her privacy there. Brittany with Spy for Rent, spyforrent.com, 790-3051. Kurre actually was on our television show last week on ABC 3340. He was fantastic. We should get you on an upcoming episode whenever you're ready. I've seen enough datelines and stuff to see where phones ping off particular towers, which is something that is relatively new to obviously a lot of us. And they even ping with satellite dishes. You can actually, if you have a cell phone and you're in an airplane and it's turned on, you can actually see where the airplane is, which I thought was really, really fascinating. When you're talking about ping services, what doesn't a tower in that particular case catch on a cell phone, or does it just, it knows exactly where that phone is at all times as long as the cell phone's powered up?
It really depends on how many towers are in the area, I believe. If there's one tower and it can ping to that, it'll and like I said, I am not the expert on this, but for the most part, if you're looking for GPS where a phone is or anything, if there's one tower, it may cover a wider area. So it may not be as accurate when it comes to where exactly that phone is. But if there are multiple towers, it's pinged off of multiple towers, we can kind of trace its steps. We can kind of find it that way. But it really just depends on how many towers in the area, how big of the area that tower is covering and everything. Like I said, Corey would be able to get all technical with you with all of that. But for me, I do know a little bit, that with the towers, I just lost my train of thought.
That's okay. Yeah. No, that's cool. Spy for Rent, spy4rent.com. Go to the website. It's fantastic. I know you guys are redoing that website. I love it the way it is because it's super easy to navigate. And I didn't realize I've used your services. And again, if you've ever been through a divorce or a cheating spouse, insurance, work stuff, fraud, whatever it is, man, bug sweeps, GPS, they got you covered at Spy for Rent. And they're known around the industry and around the country as the best of the best. Courtney said, let's get Brittany on because the women really seem to be in these true crime podcasts these days. The podcast, we are traditionally in the top 10% of all podcasts around the country on Tony Curre Radio and our podcast network. So I'm super proud of that. We have 19 different shows, including this one. This is one of our newest ones and it's doing really well. Why are women so into true crime podcasts? Why are women into just crime stuff, period?
I'm not really sure.
Are you into it?
Interesting. Yeah, I find it all interesting. Yep. And in fact, I was talking to my post office lady, my mail lady. I have a really good relationship with her and we mail out a lot of stuff, and invoices and different things. So I'm always mailing things. And so she came by and she was asking about our business and talking about it. And she said, if you would do a podcast that you continually could listen to or whatever, she said, all of the post office people would listen to it. And I think a lot of the ones she works with are females, but she did say, if you could do this on it, she was like, I would listen to this because we listen to podcasts all the time as we're driving around, Amazon drivers, postal workers. You don't really think about it, but, they're driving so much around everywhere. They want to find something that's interesting. And I think sometimes this kind of stuff, true crime or, PI work, all of that, it's relatable in a way, not that you've been divorced or whatever, but a lot of people have, or you've touched somebody that has been divorced, people that are going through a child custody battle or that have been dealing with some, stuff with their business. And so it's relatable. And I think they can think, okay, well, if that were me, what would I do? And, kind of put themselves in your shoes. And, it's just kind of interesting. But women, I do feel like are more interested in that than men. But yeah, everybody that I talk to is like, if you could just talk all day long. And I'm like, what time do you think I have to talk all day long about all of this? And we can't give out all of our most interesting facts all the time. We can be vague. But I can't use everything. But they just, I think also women are nosy. You think of women as being more nosy than men, So they just want to be in the know and they kind of want to. It's just intriguing. At least the way my brain works, I like to listen to all of that stuff and kind of see how it plays out. I don't want to stop in the middle of it. I want to go all the way because I want to know how it ends and all of that. So I don't know why women are into it that much, but I do know that is a true thing. So
Jeff Hammock, of course, a person you work with, knew Spy for Rent very, very well. Used to come on our show all the time and do this segment called Love, Lust, and Life. And of course, women had a lot to do with that. I was thinking, when you think about spies and private investigators, traditionally you think of men. Maybe it's because of a lot of the men shows that have been on there. And then when you think of women spies, you think of women Russian spies, and you think very attractive. And they get what Maria Butina, of course, is a Russian spy that I guess she came out 5 or 6, 7 years ago. She got popped or something. Anyway, she did a tell-all where she basically would talk about how it was to be a woman Russian spy, and anything went, anything goes. Can you talk about what kind of advantages does a woman spy have over a male spy? How can you influence those advantages? How can you exploit those advantages? Obviously, there's a lot of sex appeal that comes into place. And I know men, we think with two things. One's our wallet. You know what the other one is? We do really dumb stuff when a great looking woman comes up to talk to us. Does it make it easier for you? Not to take away from how great you are at what you do, but obviously you're a female and men are attracted to females.
Yeah. No, you're not going to offend me with that question. I get it all the time. So, it depends on what type of investigation you're doing. And I have to be really careful when I'm going into a bar and I need to do bar surveillance. I almost like to have somebody with me, whether it's male or female. A lot of times I like to have a male with me, not because I need somebody there, but I get hit on a whole lot if I'm sitting at the bar trying to do some video recording and everything. And I have all these people coming up asking me to buy a drink. And I'm like, well, that's good. I guess in a way it blends in. But at the same time, when it's happening all the time or somebody's trying to hold a conversation with me, and that's not what I'm there for, it gets a little distracting. So I'm not saying men don't get hit on when they're at the bar, but, just going as a female by myself, I get hit on a decent amount at the bar. So it impedes my investigation a lot of times. So that can be, hit or miss. What Corey would say is funny with a female investigator. He talks about how females can't drive very well.
Mm-hmm.
And so, a lot of the females we have to follow, they drive extremely crazy. And so he actually would prefer me if it's somebody that drives like that. He's like, I'll do the investigation once they get to wherever they are. But if you could just follow them, because they are driving like just bats out of hell. And he's like, you can't, how do you follow that? And he's like, well, Brittany, you're a female, you know how to drive that way. Go ahead, you do it. And so, it's just, not always, but and Corey is really good at following. All of our investigators are really good at that, but it is interesting to see the difference between when you're following a male versus a female and kind of the driving patterns and everything that all these police officers want to say, oh, all the women get the speeding tickets, all the women get this. It kind of, I've always said, that's not a true thing. But now that after doing this, I think maybe they're onto something.
So I have to ask you, because every guy that's watching this right now is wanting me to ask this question. So I'm going to. You obviously are very attractive. You just said that sometimes you got to turn that sex appeal on. How often do you find yourself leaning into that? Because you're very good at it. You're attractive. You should get hit on at bars. So I'm assuming. So if you're looking at somebody, they're probably coming to you before you're actually going to them, are they not? And how do you initiate that type of contact when you know there's going to be some type of sexual tension between you and the person you're doing surveillance on?
It depends, and sometimes I can look like I'm 12. The benefit of having me is I can, look like I'm 12 and put my hair up in a hat, and you just don't, I'm not going to get hit on. So if I know I'm going to go into a scenario and I'm by myself and I don't need to get hit on, I kind of have to try to change the way I dress or what I'm wearing, not put makeup on or, whatever I have to do. But obviously, like you're talking about going into a bar, like I have to, and sometimes I have to do that by myself. And sometimes it is an advantage. Like we don't typically try to trap people. I'm not trying to go up to somebody to see if they'll cheat on me because we think they're cheating on their spouse or anything like that. But I know that is something that, people have done in the past. And that is something that if I wanted to, I could probably achieve that pretty well. But I try not to use, except for if I'm trying to get into, let's say I need to get into an apartment complex or something that is a locked gate. I'm going to flirt. I'm going to do whatever I can to get into that. If I can't get into that lock gate, I don't know the code or whatever it is. And I will say a lot of times you have Corey, who's big, 6 foot, 1, and, and sometimes, he can turn the charm on too, and all males can. But, me, I'm a short little female that's just, I look super innocent most of the time. I'm not looking like I'm going to go rob somebody or whatever. So a lot of times I can go flirt, if you want to say flirt my way into getting something that maybe a male wouldn't be able to do. Or if we have to do investigations where we have to do interviews or anything like that, a lot of times I look less, I don't know, I don't want to say aggressive. Like I don't look, it's not because a male looks aggressive or anything, but a lot of times I look like I'm they feel more comfortable talking to me or something. And now sometimes you have people that only want to talk to a male because they respect the male a lot more. And we do see that a lot too. So that it works both ways. There's some people, just depends on the person and where you're doing your investigation, whether it benefits being a male or female. That's why it's great to have both. But
yeah. And pardon me for keep asking these questions because I've never interviewed a female investigator and I gosh, if you were going into a bar, or whatever, it would be, you would warm up very, very nicely. Let's put it that way. And I'm being complimentary towards you. And I would think it'd be a lot easier. Are there any different ways that you approach a particular case, or do males and females approach different? Being in surveillance and watching somebody, you get to really figure out a lot of their oddities, a lot of their habits, a lot of the things they do over and over and over again. You may be doing things over the course of days and months, but is there a particular reference point that you use to get started when you investigate? Are there differences between how women investigate people as opposed to men? I guess is the question I'm asking.
Well, I think it depends yet again on the situation. And a lot of times females can get closer to the subject. A lot of times they're not being seen as threatening or anything like that, like you kind of said. So like if I need to be in an environment, let's say it's a bar or whatever, I can sit closer. And if I just look a guy's way, they're not going to think twice about it a lot of times. But if you have a male investigator that's sitting there staring, at somebody, then that's a little bit different. They're going to be like, what does this person keep looking at me for? So it really just depends. But then, if we're following a female, it might be better to have a male investigator because they may be able to get a little bit closer. And maybe the same thing on the reverse side. So it really just depends on the situation. Like I know there's certain things that, I will say, like, when it comes to clothing and things like that, you think about a male, Corey can throw on a hat or, change his shirt really quick, and he's not going to be noticed at the next restaurant or whatever. With me, I have to be super careful about all of that because, I've got long hair, obviously. Like, if I put it up, it's not easy to have it down. I do have like an adapter in my car. So if I have to have a straightener plugged in so I can try to straighten my hair to make it look different. But, and I have different outfits and all of that, but it's a little bit more effort, I want to say, on a female's part being an investigator in that aspect, because you've got to really learn how to change the way you look, or, you don't want to wear the exact same thing ever, male or female, going into multiple restaurants a night or, wherever you're going, if you're going to come in contact with this person multiple times. But it's a little bit easier on the male side to be able to change their appearance, whereas females have to work at it a little bit more.
Is there a particular type of case you like more than the other? Is it a cheating case? Is it an insurance case? Or is it something like do you like doing night shift stuff, surveillance type? What's your favorite type of work to do as a spy, as a private investigator?
Well, I get the most out of child custody cases. I'll just be honest. I feel like when we do something like that, we're doing really good work for a really good reason. So that for me is my number one. I'm not saying that I wouldn't put less effort into any other investigation, but that's the one that I make sure I'm on my P's and Q's, doing everything I need to, because those to me are one of the more valuable things that we do. We're, protecting a child, making sure a child's going to whichever parent needs to, whether that's the mom or the dad. And, a lot of people say, you would think that I would favor the mom. I've been through a divorce, and I am a mom of 2 little boys, and I do feel like I'm a good mom. But there are some moms that don't need to have primary custody. And, in the court system, a lot of times the female is given the benefit of the doubt. And so it's a little bit harder on the male and the father to have to go and prove, they've got to spend all this money on us to try to prove it, and not to say we don't work for, females too, trying to show that the dad is a drunk or whatever it is. But, a lot of times, and people assume because I'm female, I'm going to side with the woman. But in this business, we've seen so much that there's no, you can't go into it biased over either one because you just don't know. It's situational. But, I will say the one thing that I don't like to do as much is insurance cases. Now I do them a good bit, but if I have to sit in the car for 14 hours by myself, waiting on somebody to move, one of the number one questions I get from like friends and stuff, is how do you pee? Like as a male, you think about that, like males, it's super easy for you to go in a bottle or whatever. Not so much. There's a little more coordinating for me. So if I have to, pee in a cup or a bottle or whatever, that's a little more effort on my part. So I prefer not to do those where I have to sit in the car for hours on end, just because it's a little more challenging in that area. But really, I enjoy all types of investigations and what we do. We just do so much, a variety. It's not like I think it would get boring if I was doing the same thing every day. Like if I had to do insurance cases 7 days a week and I'm just in the car for 10 hours or more a day waiting on this person to move. But then, and we go through lulls, we go through highs and lulls, where we have this one case where this man left his wife and she just swore up and down he was cheating. And we went and watched the new place he moved into. I can't tell you how many days, how many hours. And he never left. He never had somebody come there. He went to work. He came home. I guess he just didn't want to be with his wife anymore, which happens sometimes. Sure. But we saw no evidence of him cheating. And so some of those, when you have to sit there all day and, just stare stare at this door hoping somebody comes out. Those are not as much fun, but we do so much a variety of everything that I never really get bored.
I would think that just from because I've been doing the show with you guys and I know you guys for so long. By the way, this is Spy for Rent, great show, Spy for Rent. Make sure you put Tony Curry Radio or TKR in there. Spy the number 4rent.com 790-3051. I would think that if you're sitting in a car, let's say 6 or 7 hours, someone would see you. Eventually. First question is, how do you stay so incognito? And second of all, do you work with local law enforcement just in case someone says, hey, listen, there's been a woman sitting outside my house for the last 8 hours in a car and I'm worried about her?
So this is, that's another thing that people ask about is if you're sitting somewhere, how do you not get seen? And it depends. We have different methods of, we sit in the back seat of the car or the trunk of the car. If I'm in an SUV, I'm in the very back. Nobody, just where I can see out the back side of it to where I need to go. So I might have something on the windshield so you don't know that somebody's in the car or whatever it is. But we don't just sit in the front seat typically. Yeah. But again, with a female, if I'm sitting out there for a few hours, if anybody says anything, normally they're asking like, hey, sweetie, are you okay? Like, is there anything I can help you with? With a man, they're typically calling the police. They don't even want to approach the car if they think a guy's been sitting in the car for so long or whatever. But as a female, that is another advantage. Sometimes like they just want to know if I'm okay. And so, I will say I got really sick one time on an investigation. This may be a little too TMI, but I had to open my car door and just throw up all outside of the car door. And I did have a older lady. I mean, and we don't sit right in front of a house, right? So it's not like the person right there that I'm watching is going to, but I did have this lady come up to me, she was an older lady and she just wanted to make sure I was okay. And I was like, yeah, but I think I can't drive. So I'm going to sit here for a while. And I had to sit there for a couple more hours and everything. But I mean, it went into the whole, okay, well now I can sit in the front seat with the air conditioning going on and maybe nobody's going to say anything. But not all the time, because a lot of times we have to turn off the car, get in the back, and whether it's hot or cold, and we have fans or heaters, and we can do that without the car being on. But yeah, I will say that it just, we have several methods of being able to do that without being caught. And sometimes either we are in an area where I have to call law enforcement and say, hey, I'm a private investigator. If you want to come check out my license, you're welcome to. Sure. But I'm going to be here in this car. This is my tag number. If somebody calls, please, a suspicious vehicle, please know that I'm just working on an investigation. And most law enforcement agencies, like most places, they don't question too much, at least when I call. I don't know about some of the other male investigators. And sometimes we want them to know, but then sometimes it could be somebody that's a buddy of theirs or whatever in that neighborhood. And they may think we're watching somebody that we're not, or they may want to ask a bunch of questions that we don't have to give them the answers to. So we try not to involve them as much as possible, but most of the time when we have to, it's not a big deal.
Brittany's with us, Spy for Rent, doing a fantastic. Have you ever done a podcast before?
No.
Man, you're killing it. You're natural. You're fantastic. You're doing wonderful work. 790-3051, 790-3051. Brittany's with Spy for Rent, Spy the number 4rent or forrent.com. I've talked to both Jeff and Corey about preventative surveillance, and I a lot of people, I never thought in a million years I'd be using Spy for Rent, and I probably wouldn't had someone from your office not say, listen, I think we can help you with this particular case. I didn't even think about using a spy. I used you guys, and it worked out beautifully for me, and I found out some things that I really needed to know. I come to find out that Jeff has a group of women who are very wealthy. That use dating apps, and that perhaps sometimes when they have a date, sometimes they'll call and say, hey, listen, check this guy out first, because they don't want to have some money digger coming after her, or they want to be going out with a woman just because she's wealthy. One night he called and one of these knuckleheads was on this woman's roof, hanging from her gutter. And I'm like, so that actually works, I guess, to do that preventative stuff. And then you're talking about nursing homes, babysitters. I think a lot of people think just because you're going through an app, that you're getting a babysitter and it's got to be okay. Well, I can see enough Uber drivers, getting robbed and this, that, and the other to know that not everyone's on the up and up when it comes to doing these business things. First of all, have you ever gone into a situation where you were just doing some preventative work just to see if there's anything there and you really found something crazy? Like you're like, wow, that's not really what I was looking for. We'll start there.
So we've had several investigations where we do, background checks for, we've had, so there was this one couple and these parents weren't crazy about this guy that had asked their daughter to marry him. And we did a background investigation and we found a whole lot of stuff, some fraud stuff. He had, filed bankruptcy. There were a couple of things, like he kept saying he was making all this money. And he wasn't. And so we were able to provide all that information and show that, and so I think they ended up not getting married, but he was just kind of a con artist. Like he was able to, because a lot of times people are good. I mean, I've been divorced, like I said, so I know kind of part of that, like, and then when you have to go back in the dating world and you think about people that are going to be around your kids, even, you think about more background checks for younger kids or, first getting married or whatever, but even for like us as adults, if we have somebody that's going to be around our kids or whatever, I want to know every little thing about them before, So if I think it's somebody that I've gone on a date or two with, because maybe I'm not going to do that after, before the first date or whatever, but I don't know. Some of these people are crazy. You might want to before your first date, but, if I'm going to go on a couple dates with somebody and then, I think I'm going to bring them around my kids, I'm going to dig into everything that I can. And, I would much rather pay somebody $85 or $150 to do like a criminal background check and make sure there's nothing there that I don't need to know about. There's a lot of domestic violence charges that, a lot of people don't know about. So they may have one on their record. How are you really going to know that when you start dating somebody or where you start, bringing your kids around somebody? Or, really any scenario when you're going to be around somebody or if you're going to bring somebody into your business and, they've got these charges that you don't know about. A lot of the people that do background checks, they just do kind of a little skim over, basic things. And where when you do background checks with us, one of the things you get is we can dig a little deeper and it's not crazy expensive to do that either, but we can do a criminal background check for $150, is there anything that they've done that just stands out that's kind of crazy? But yeah, we do a lot of that. And we've seen a lot on the back end, people that haven't done that and how much money they've lost or they've come to physical harm or whatever because they didn't. And so now instead of doing the preventative stuff, we're now on the back end trying to go and prove that this person is a drunk and that they're violent and that they have a record and all of this stuff when they could have saved themselves a lot of heartache or, a lot of pain.
Listen, I'm not a nosy guy and I don't even like to look through my kids' phones because if I don't have a reason to look through their phones, I don't have a reason to call a spy to see if my mate is cheating on me unless I have a gut feeling and there's something bigger that I'm. But we sit there and said, we talked about this case where the guy was getting married and people were like, emailing me going, how in the world they're getting married? How in the world did she not see that? You'd be surprised. Again, I've seen Datelines where guys go, yeah, he works for the government. I can't really talk about my job. I work in surveillance. I have to leave right now. I'll be home in 3 days. Don't try to call me because I can't answer my phone. And people fall for that stuff. And next thing you know, you're married to someone like that. And they end up, in most times, if it doesn't feel right to your gut, chances are it's not right in the first place.
And really, in my mind, I think, for me to pay a little bit of money up front to make sure it's the right person for the rest of my life, they never have to know I ever investigated into them. I never did anything, but it gives me peace of mind. I know that they're not lying and they're not trying to be a con artist. They're being genuine. And that is, because some people are like, they have government jobs. My dad was Army, and so, there are things that they can't talk about, right? They can't tell us or everything, but if you're not in that, setting, if you're not used to that setting and somebody's saying they're military or they're government worker or whatever, then it's easy to be fooled. Whereas if you've been in that setting before, you kind of know the questions to ask or the things to look for. And you mentioned a babysitter too, a lot of babysitters get fired, and they're on these apps or nursing homes or people that, my grandmother was on hospice for a little bit. And the sitter we did a, complete background check. We had some really good friends that had used her before. But we did a background check and everything on her before she came in to sit with my grandmother, because even though she's on hospice, we want her to be treated correctly. Your kids, it's like, you want them to be treated the way they should be. And, people have cameras up and everything, and that works. That's great because you can see things. But why, if you can prove that this person already has had a background of that before you bring them into their home, before you're having to see it on camera, them doing something they shouldn't, I don't understand why you wouldn't spend just a little bit of money to do that up front.
Brittany, absolute home run today. Great stuff here. It's called Spy for Rent. Spy, the number 4rent.com or forrent.com. Their number 790-3051, 790-3051. If you think to yourself, I've never want to hire a private investigator or a spy, you go to their website and you may just find something that you want to look up on somebody. It's really amazing because it's kind of like, wow, and the babysitter thing to me is, and I'm also divorced as well. I have not brought another female around my kids, and it's been 4 years now. I just haven't gotten to know someone well enough to even want to do that. But it does make me want to do some investigating because I want to know who's around my kids. Right. I want to know who's around my kids. And if they come to me and they're telling me some cockamamie weird story and I'm like, wait a minute, what's this person's name again? I'll do some research on it because they're around my children. So I get it. 790-3051 Spy for Rent. Brittany, thank you so much. You can come on the show anytime. Tell Corey he can take the next couple of weeks off. You're fantastic, okay?
He probably preferred not to have to do it every week. No, not really. He likes to hear himself talk, but
He's good at what he does. Thank you so much for your time. Good. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.